welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the podcast where we discuss the intersection between psychology, leadership, and what it means to your small business. As always, my name is Luke Upchurch. Today I am joined by our special guest, Mr. Donnie Disler. Donnie's been with us in the past, but today we're talking about mentoring, and so I thought, what better person to bring along this journey with me than Mr. Donnie. So, Donnie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, appreciate being back. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. For those of you that didn't catch the first episode, I'm a 21-year Navy veteran, and I just retired in May of 21. So joined the corporate world just shortly after, and that's where I met this wonderful dude we're talking about with now.
Thank you, Donnie. Appreciate that. I can't help but notice. I don't know if we'll end up using the video for this one because we're getting, it's a little grainy right now. But
Yeah,
if we do, you guys will see we're almost the same guy. Like tatted up, long beard, thick glasses.
that's
The
right.
whole nine. If
You're
I
gonna
just had
wear
a
it,
blue
wear it.
hat, we'd be
Yeah.
set, brother.
And yeah, and how ironic was it that when I met you, the guy that introduced me to you thought I was you when he saw me the first time. Yeah, he was like, I thought you were Luke. I'm like, nah, man.
Oh, that's funny.
There's only
That's
one
funny.
me and there's only one you, and that's how it is.
There you go. Well, in terms of content today, folks, I really wanted to lean into the concept of mentoring. And it's kind of funny, actually. I was going through thinking about what episodes have I done, what things are still on the horizon, where do we have excitement as far as, what episodes are people listening to? What are they prepping for? And a lot of the episodes that are getting traction right now on this podcast have to do with things around getting a job. So I targeted this, I structured this podcast in general, this entire business, this psych leadership model was really structured around the idea of helping small business leaders to be better leaders, to understand the psychology behind leadership. And in the industrial organizational psychological sense, how do I get more out of my employees? How do I meet them where they are, focus on my people, understanding that as a side effect of that, if I focus on the right things, then things like the budget and the numbers and the projects, that's all the side effect. That is the aftermath of I focused on my team, I did what was right for them, and all this other stuff fell into place. Well, here I am focusing on the leader, and it seems like most of the audience is after, well, how do I get to be a leader? How do I get the job in the first place? So we have an interviewing prep episode. That is the number one episode by a landslide. That's the one that people are clamoring for. And I have one out there for resume building. I have one out there for effective presentations to be able to really wow somebody in that interview setting. But I think maybe we're putting the horse before the cart, Donnie. I think that's why I need to pump the brakes a little bit, come back to before I can even be ready to interview, I probably need a mentor. And I shouldn't say a mentor. I should say mentors, plural, right? They're not a Swiss Army knife. They're not a one size fits all. If you find a good mentor that has that experience, yeah, maybe you can leverage them like that. But that's not the norm. So that's really what I wanted to focus on today is the psychology of how to find the right kind of mentor, why you need one in the first place, and how that can be the springboard to your career. So Donnie, in your experience, do you have a mentor today?
I have so many. And ironically, after what was it? I don't know, we worked together, what, 6 months, maybe seven, maybe eight,
Something like
something like
that, yeah.
that. And you split from the team and our team got absorbed into another thing. And I was like, how do I navigate this thing? And yeah, so you definitely one of my mentors in the corporate world, being that you have so much more vast experience at it than I do. A lot of my mentors came through the Navy, just because that's what I did for 21 years. And I think for me, finding a mentor and the importance of it is it comes down to don't take advice from somebody who's not already doing what you want to do or what you aspire to do, you know? So I saw when I stepped foot into that company first day, here's a guy who's got all his stuff in one sock and leading a team and making it look effortless. How do I do that? I know how to do it in my old life, but I don't know how to do it here. Probably should follow this guy. So that's when I found a cozy spot beneath your wing.
Well, that's humbling, Donnie. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
man.
greatly appreciate that. Well, and that kind of ties right into the first aspect that I wanted to dip into here is why mentoring matters in the first place. And one of the things that you kind of hit on there is that there's this critical difference between managing and mentoring. It's kind of like, and I'm sure you've heard this in the past. There is there's a distinct difference between being a leader and being a manager, right? It's one
Agreed.
thing to be focused on dates and deliverables and how do I meet this deadline? It's a completely different thing to figure out how do I unlock the intrinsic motivation of my team.
Right.
So with that, one of the reasons that mentoring works so well, there's a psychological study out there. It's based off of a guy named Vygotsky. And I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but for those of you in the field, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD. And the whole idea is that um, learning accelerates with guidance. That if we have somebody that is able to, like you said, kind of show us the way, somebody that makes it seem effortless, whatever the it is, and we'll come back to that more in a minute. But the it that you're trying to go for, the thing that seems effortless to that individual that you're trying to emulate, just by being around them, just by having that guidance, that's going to accelerate your own learning, because it shows you kind of two different sides of the coin, if you will. It allows you to go forth and do that role or that thing, whether it's something in, we were in process improvement, right? So one of the easy examples is you coming from the Navy space. It was a little bit different in terms of the political nature that we have to put on things, right? We got to put a little bit more
Probably.
polish on it in the corporate world. We can't be as crass or as straight up with folks as sometimes we would like to be. And so we, through working together, you get to kind of experiment in that space, but then you also get to emulate. You see how somebody else does it, and children actually do this a lot too. That's why, for example, those of you that have young kids, if you have the chance, and I know this is a financial thing and it's a luxury that not everybody has, but if you have the chance, Montessori style education systems are going to be far superior than the traditional public school, right? The traditional public school is just follow the leader. We just teach them how to make make a better widget, but they don't necessarily learn from one another. Montessori schools, my nephew's in a Montessori school right now, and this kid is 4 years old. And for instance, they were teaching the kids the other day how to change diapers. And what 4-year-old is changing his brother or sister's diaper? Probably zero, right? That's probably a low number. However,
Yeah.
he will know, and he's got a little sister coming, little niece on the way in about another month here, but he will know through that mentorship that's happening in that school environment. Again, going back to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, because he is developing in that space, learning from other kids his age, other peers, that allows him the growth, the space to be able to basically adjust on the fly. So when his mom and dad bring this new baby home, will he be changing the diaper? No, no, not a chance. However, will he know the steps that need to be taken? Will he know the components of that? Will he know mom's going to need a wipe? Mom's going to need a diaper. Those kinds of things. And that's a rudimentary example, but the same thing applies in the business space, right? Going back to making a presentation or facing adversity in the workplace, right? You present an idea and the boss kind of poo-poos over the whole thing. In the Army or in the Navy, it was probably a little bit different approach than the corporate step back, swallow your pride, let me figure this out and come back at a different angle. Would you agree?
I would. However, there are I think it's in that case the comparison you make is there's different levels to it. And that is, in the corporate world it is very polished. It is almost scripted sometimes because everybody knows exactly how this is going to go because we've done this before. But, in the military, for me, we used to into we used to go to operations and intelligence briefs. We called it Ops Intel. And it was the same thing every evening. But sometimes somebody would make a presentation and it would be like playing Stump the Chump up there, and somebody just got embarrassed. Um, but rightfully so, because they didn't have their stuff together, right? Who did you show this to prior to, right? And where I was at in that regard was I was a chief. So we were like that middle management. We were the buffer between, the junior enlisted folks and the officers, right? And the officers is who runs that ops intel brief, right? And the captain is the one who's most likely going to play stump the chump with you because he's seen it, done it, lived it, did it before, like has forgotten more than we'll know about it, right? Because that's why they make them captains of the ship. But the thing that we did is we were that buffer. So if you were a junior enlisted or even you know not senior enlisted, but if you made a presentation and you had to present it in front of the captain and you didn't run it by us, well, pretty good chance you're gonna get your lunch ate for you. But that's just a prime example of the different levels, right? So I can tell a sailor in this regard, like, hey, you need to fix this, you need to fix that, like this is messed up, redline it to death. But if you fix all those things, you don't get your, lunch fed to you.
Right, right. You don't.
So that's just
Yeah,
an example of the different levels, right? And I think that comparison stands true in corporate America, because I mean, there's times where I had to give briefs, and you'd be like, "Hey, man, let me see your thing first." I was like, "All right, here it is." You'd be like, "Oh, you probably might not want to say it that way," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that works. Yeah, yeah, but I know how he's going to react or she's going to react to that." And then I would change it, right? And it would go over fine. So
right,
that's the results in action. Like you got to take that leap and believe that pretty good chance that back to this person who's done it and you want to do it as they do it, you might want to take that advice.
right, right. And that, I mean, in a nutshell, that's really what mentoring is all about, is learning from one another. And a common misconception out there, a lot of people think, well, I have to reach this level in my education, in my career, in my political stature, et cetera, et cetera. They have this fictitious bar, and they believe until I'm here, until I'm this high on that bar, I am not qualified to be a mentor. And I always push back on folks for that. There's everybody has that thing in their life that you do better than other people. And somebody is looking at you saying, "Damn, I wish I could do it like that. I wish I had that skill." And so that goes back to our point before on the idea that, you probably need more than one mentor. I'm working with probably about 5 or 6 right now. And I say probably because Some of them kind of, you have more continual meetings with some, and some are, every 6, 8 months, because of the tool that they offer, the thing that they help you with. So, I mean, for example, I'm finishing up my psychology program right now for my master's. There was a time I was really thinking that I wanted to go for a doctorate. And so one of my mentors is a doctor in psychology who actually helps students go through residency. And so when I'd have ideas on, could this be a thesis, or, am I thinking about this the right way? Am I approaching my career in this way? That's the guy that I ask. Now, is he the guy that I'm going to ask about my day job, my cybersecurity stuff? Well, no, that's
Probably
a
not.
different hat. It's a different tool, right?
Hmm.
But so we, as a society, and so all the leaders out there, I would challenge you to really think through. Just because you are not in your role, you may not be a leader of people. That's not what qualifies you to be a mentor, right? You don't have to be a leader of people. You don't have to be at a certain spot in your career. You just need to have the willingness, the give a damn to help somebody else. And typically when I've gotten in mentoring positions where I get the opportunity to work with somebody, it's, if you've ever been in those meetings, and Donnie, you've been in these, you're in this meeting and somebody speaks up, somebody makes a point, somebody makes a presentation, and you think to yourself, damn, that guy or that gal has got to be at this level, right? They're way ahead of me. And then you look them up and you realize that they're bottom rung, or just not what you expected. You're thinking I'm going to see director, and you see senior, professional, and you think, what? That doesn't add up. And those, that's the diamonds. That's the people that you want to reach out to. And even if you don't become their mentor, the fact that you reached out and said, hey, you've got something, you have a talent, you have a thing that should be exploited, you've got this concept that you can push out there to the world. um, just the fact that you reached out to them is going to boost their confidence so damn much. Even if they don't end up making you their mentor, they're still, you just threw gasoline on the fire.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that people um, have mentors that they don't know they have.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, um, there was this girl used to work for me. She was a third class. She was a seaman, which is an E3. And at the time I was the E7. I was the chief, right? So we worked in the gunnery division, and there comes a time in a young sailor's life when you're on a ship and you have to pull KP. You have to work in the scullery, or you have to work, in the mess hall, or, cooking, cleaning, things like that, right? So we had, as chiefs, we had one assigned to us, and those folks usually taken care of a little bit better because it's not, not ground level. It's not officer, like it's not the wardroom, which is where the officers are, but it's middle management. And she worked for us in there, but it involved, you know, cleaning up after, uh, in my case, slobs. Not me per se, but other folks, and she didn't like it. She hated it, and she's like, "You please just move me somewhere else." I'm like, but over time, I had spent, probably 3 to 4 years with this girl, and she progressed through the ranks, and we ended up getting along really well because she saw that I was leading that division, and it
Mm-hmm.
was not in the best place, um, and that's putting it the best way I know how. Um, and I turned it around, right? And that's not a pat on me. It's just a collection of us doing the work together, and which is another point that I'm sure that we'll get to. Like the difference between a leader and a manager is just like somebody that's willing to get in there and turn with you. Yeah, that's who I was to them, right? So we ended up making it well. So here it is. I've been retired 4, maybe almost 5 years now, and she made senior chief, which is the rank that I got out at. I saw it on Facebook. I texted her. I said, "Hey, congratulations." She said, "You have no idea how much you helped me grow as, a sailor and as a leader. I celebrate this with you, not just with myself, because this is your promotion too." I said, "Well, I guess that lets me know I didn't do some, I didn't do it wrong." So, but we never had like an official like mentor mentee thing. It was just there was a couple of times once I left the ship, and this was over a course of probably 8, 10 years, where she would reach out and say, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Can you help me, give me a contact or whatever?" And it always worked out. But I didn't think nothing of it. It was just friends helping friends.
Mm-hmm.
But then for her to say, you know, "I am who I am, and I am the leader I am because of you."
Yeah.
That that's real mentorship. And in this regard, like, we never had a thing. It was never like, "Oh, she's my mentee," or she was never like, "Well, that's my mentor right there." Because in the Navy, we have those agreements too, right? Who's your mentor? Oh, it's this person. So you write that down or whatever,
Right.
and we have these things called career development boards. Um, and it's just how you progress in your career, professional development. But that's a prime example of being a mentor and not knowing it.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I tell my team all the time, I do recommend that that each of them get mentors, that they get somebody official that they can document and follow up with. And a lot of corporations have some sort of mechanism to track that, and that's good. It's good to check that box. But to your point, I always tell my team, well, I'm the mentor that you get for free. Like I'm here for you. I'm here to try and support you. That's my measure of success. And that goes back to that distinction between a manager or a leader, right? A manager says my measure of success is hitting these goals. And for me, as a leader, yes, I definitely want to reach those goals. Don't get me wrong; those are still important. That's still an aspect of why I have a paycheck, right? But that shouldn't be the primary focus. Like I'll give you an example. Years ago, I worked in the contact center. This is when I first started out at the company I work for now. Worked in the contact center, and they said, the leadership structure said, well, average handle time on the phone, average hold time, and after call work. Those are the three main metrics that you got to go for. And and then out the other side of their mouth, they said, well, we have member quality, which is called voice of the consumer. It's like a member survey. And then you have internal quality, which is literally, did you follow all the procedural steps? Did you follow SOP, standard operating procedure? And so you would get these ratings, voice of the consumer and call quality about once a month. And then at the end of every day, you would get your AHT, hold time, and after call work, right? And so every day I'm getting these metrics telling me that I'm taking too long on the phone calls. That uh, and it was after call work was fine. It was the call itself and hold time. That was the stuff that was taking too long. And I finally came back to my leadership and said, listen, you're telling me that first call resolution is important. You're telling me to take care of the member holistically, but you want it done fast. Well, do you want it done fast? Do you want it done accurate? Do you want it done cheap? You only get to pick two.
That's right.
And and ultimately, if my call quality is perfect and my after call and my voice of the consumer is perfect, who gives a damn if it takes a little bit longer? Now, eventually, I pulled back the metrics and proved to them that if I solve the call on first call resolution, um, that it essentially takes calls out of the system. We found that on average, a call that is not resolved in first call resolution, that there are 3 calls to that incident. And so if I take a little longer on call one, who gives a crap? Call two and three don't exist. They're not part of the equation anymore. Making sense?
It does, for sure.
So, I mean, essentially, what it all comes down to there, and this is call this a pro tip, but mentoring isn't about solving somebody else's problems. It's about teaching them how to think through those problems themselves. It's giving them the tools, giving them the guidance, giving them the support to get to the other side of that, and eventually get to the point where they don't directly need you. What I mean is they're still stepping on the foundation that you helped them build, but you don't have to
Yeah.
be there to hold up that step anymore.
Yeah, teach a man to fish, right?
Right. Right. So there are other psychological things that mentorship builds, and this should happen organically. If you've got a good group of mentors that you're working with, this should build out organically. And so one of them, and this is probably the biggest one that I see that helps folks, is emotional intelligence. um, I see so many students, they come out of school and they've got this fancy piece of paper on their wall that says I am smart, right? Some sort of degree, some sort of certificate. Now they don't have any real world experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first time that their boss says, yeah, just because you have that piece of paper doesn't mean you're not an idiot. And maybe your boss says it nicer, but they don't always, right? Sometimes these kids get a little butthurt about it. They get their feelings hurt. And so being able to help them understand how to have emotional intelligence. And frankly, a leader that is coming at them that way probably doesn't have EI either, but you know where I'm coming from.
I
Um,
do.
that's one of the primary benefits, I think, is to be able to take a situation and bounce it off your mentor and say, this is how I reacted, this is how they reacted. And where it builds is your mentor ideally is an impartial third party, right? So
Yeah.
they're giving you a perspective that maybe you didn't think through yourself. What are your thoughts on that, Donnie? Have you had that experience?
Uh, yeah. So I can tell you that building that emotional intelligence to me translates to sometimes if there's a degree of vulnerability to that, right? And same goes with mentoring because it's like um, if you're going to ask for someone's feedback, be able to receive it. And part of that feedback is having that emotional intelligence to have thick enough skin or having that mental toughness about you to be like, oh, maybe I'm not a screw up, but maybe I just didn't look at it, from this angle versus this one, right? So
Right.
that's part of that of you wanting to walk that walk the way that they walk it. And sometimes it actually goes opposite of that. Somebody could say, "Hey, I don't like how you did that, and that's not going to go over well. Tell me how you got there." Well, how I got there is because I did this and I did this, and this research shows that, and you go down that road. And maybe this happens too. The mentee teaches the mentor. And I've had that happen as well. You've I think sometimes mentors get in a not in a comfort zone, but similar to a comfort zone where it's like, yeah, I've been doing this, I've been doing this, I've been doing this, this is the way. And then somebody says, nah, I think we ought to do this. And you're like, nah, that's not going to work. And then they say, have you ever looked at it like this? So I think another component of that relationship is it is an equal learning experience for both parties, right?
Yeah.
Because that goes back to your original point of have many, because you never know that your mentee may be very powerful in a certain thing that maybe you're not. And all of a sudden now you've picked up this thing from them. Maybe not a mentor to you, but certainly a resource when you think,
Right.
it just because, and you were, and for me, like that's always something that sticks out is like that point of conversation where it's like, yeah, but when you said it like this. I looked at it totally different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. One and technically speaking, there are a couple different types of mentoring relationships out there. There is some where it's uh, the the master teaching the student kind of thing.
Yeah.
I really like the peer mentoring where it's we both have a different skill set. We're both helping each other sharpen the stone, so to speak. There was this psychological study a while back that talked about marathon runners. And it talked about the idea that even though marathon runners are technically in competition with one another, if you have two or more people that are kind of running in a pack together, they will all run at kind of the same pace. They keep one another moving forward. So you run faster than me, but I'm going to speed up because I don't want to be outdone.
Yeah. A
And the
little
minute that I start running
unconscious.
faster than you pace up to me,
Yeah.
right?
Unconscious competition.
Yes, yes. And that kind of brings me into my third point there in terms of the psychology behind why mentorship actually works. There's this other psychological theory called self-determination theory. It's by a couple psychologists, Ryan and DC, and I'm probably mispronouncing that one too. It's DECI. But this was back in 2000. They talk about this idea that in order to unlock somebody's intrinsic motivation, you need three basic components. You need ABC, okay? You're going to need autonomy, you're going to need belonging, you're going to need competence. And so if we unpack those a little bit, autonomy is, this concept of I have the ability to make my own decisions. So, and as a mentor, that means that we want to give folks kind of the guidelines. You don't want to come in and say you're doing all this wrong and point the finger and course correct, berate them like a parent. You want to ask them questions, you want to give them options, you want to lay down the breadcrumbs and get them to come to the conclusion. So give them that autonomy to say, this, tell me what your problem is and let's talk through it. And the action, the decision is still theirs. And that's
Sure.
and I would equate it to a a healthy parent child relationship in the fact that if I want my kids to learn the lesson, you said it before, teach them how to fish, right? If I
Mm-hmm.
lay down the hammer and say, you will do it this way because I said to do it this way, because I didn't ask you any questions, I told you, I gave you an answer. Well, then they didn't learn anything except to follow orders and that you yell a lot, right? That's what they learned. If
Sure.
you give them autonomy, it's a completely different thing. And so this applies to mentorship. This applies to leadership, right? So autonomy is the first one. Belonging, I'm part of a team. I see some sort of efficacy to the task at hand. And so as a mentor, this is helping them understand that you've been down that path too, and but also having the humility to maybe call in for extra support. So right, like I've had mentees come to me saying, hey, can you help me with XYZ thing? And I might say, well, I don't have the skill set there. I'm not the best tool in the toolbox for you. However, I know somebody. And that
Right.
creates that community, that belonging for them, that they
Right.
understand even if I don't have the answer myself, somebody in my circle does. Right. And then
Sure.
competence, the last component of self-determination theory, competence just means I have the ability to learn the thing. Not to say I know it now, but I have the tools to be able to get there. And so a good mentoring relationship is building on all those things. Now, if you do that correctly, if you're building those three components, autonomy, belonging, and competence, then the person ends up with this intrinsic motivation unlocked in them where they are going to leverage that mentorship, that situation, to progress their career, to progress whatever their goal was. And you get to a space as a mentor, I always tell my mentees, if my drive for your success outweighs yours, we need to have a different kind of conversation. Right? A mentor isn't there
Yeah.
to wipe your hand, to hold your hand and wipe your ass. They are
Mm-hmm.
there to guide you to give you those tools so that you
Right.
can go out. If I give my mentees those tools, if my mentors give me those tools, that unlocks my intrinsic motivations so that I don't necessarily need them watching over me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're teaching a kid how to ride the bike for the first time and they finally figure out that they can balance on their own. They've got the autonomy to make the decision whether or not to ride the bike. They've got the belonging knowing that you're there with them. They've got the competence knowing that they can figure out how to ride it. And then that unlocks the intrinsic motivation so they start pedaling a little bit harder. Now you can let go of the bike,
Hmm.
right? They're riding on their own.
True story.
All right. So Donnie, are you familiar then? There's another term that I wanted to make sure that we cover here, the difference between mentorship versus sponsorship. Are you familiar with that? Have you had a sponsor in your life before?
I have. Certainly have.
So tell us a little bit about it. What's the distinction?
So in my case, a so how do I put this? So only in the Navy, when you're promoted from E6 to E7, we go through a rite of passage, if you will, right? A initiation as such. People really got bent out of shape around that word, and we changed it to and from everything else. But it's back to initiation because that's really what it is, you know. But when when you are selected for chief, and you're going to join the chief's mess, you have a primary and a secondary sponsor. Now, these persons, in my case, never met them in my life. One of which was assigned to me. The other one I had to pick. Um, and they said, well, who are you going to pick? I said, I don't know. I don't know anybody here. You know, I was joining a new ship, knew none of these people. And my sponsor, um, my secondary sponsor was assigned to me, and he's like, "All right, man, I'm here if you need me. Um, I am a representative for you, but I am not. I can't teach you everything, right? Like I can keep you from falling off that cliff or whatever that looks like. Um, but you got to pick your own primary mentor." So in my case, um, there was a guy who was on leave, and everybody told me horror stories about he was the biggest, baddest, meanest dude ever on the planet. And I said, "That's the dude I want." They were like, "You're crazy, you're nuts." I'm like, "No, I'm not, because I think that that person will make me exactly who I ought to be." So
Mm-hmm.
in this regard, it was almost like I got both, right? Because I had a sponsor who would, for all intents and purposes, not let me kill myself by doing something stupid. But then I had another sponsor who would tell me, "Hey, um, you're a screw up. You're not doing this right. And I've told you, and I've told you, and I've told you, and you keep screwing it up." Right? So I get through the season, and then after the fact, he's kind of like, "Look, man, um, I'm not your sponsor anymore. We're all in this together, you know?" And later on, I became a secondary sponsor, so I knew how to do that. And then I became a primary sponsor, and I was overall responsible for this person's initiation. And while they're called the same thing, I think that you get a little bit of both. And
Okay.
that's my experience with sponsorship versus mentorship.
Gotcha. That's a really interesting take on it. And you kind of hit on some points that I typically see in the corporate world. So in the corporate world, the distinction that I would give, I guess the easiest way to explain it is that sponsorship opens the door. Mentorship teaches you how to walk through that door with confidence. Okay.
Okay?
So for instance, at a lot of companies, in a lot of companies, you have to be at a certain level before sponsorship is really a thing. But sponsors are the people that are going to put you in touch with the right contacts. They're your loudspeaker, they're your cheerleader, and so on. But your mentor is maybe a little bit more grassroots. They're working with you to build the skills so that when the sponsor says, "Hey, Donnie's a rock star," you don't want to come in with your head hung down low, like, "Well, not really. I can't do that. I don't know that. Oh, shucky doodles." Right? You want to have a little bit of you want to get in there
Yeah. Yeah.
and have that reputation. And so working with a mentor helps to build that up. Once you get to
Mm-hmm.
that point, usually a company will start talking about sponsorship when you have made it in terms of your skill set. But the term, "it's all in who you know." Well, sponsorship is your cheerleader. They're shouting it out from the rooftops, right? Donnie's a
Yeah.
rock star. You got to meet this guy. And because you've worked with your mentor, then you show up. You enter that room and people recognize what, what they're dealing with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I would encourage leaders out there to do, for leaders that are building these programs, because that's one of the next things we're going to talk about, is how you build this kind of program in your organization. If you're building this program, know that if you're brand new, if you're small business, sponsorship is fantastic. It is probably something that is later on in the horizon. So you want to plan with that in mind. But if you don't have a mentorship program established at your company, that is further down the line, right? You got to crawl before you can walk. If you have an established mentorship situation at your employer and you've never heard of the term sponsorship, do yourself a favor, go out and do some research on it. I'm going to post some links in the chat. In the description, rather. I'm going to post some links that'll give you a little bit more color on that, but I definitely encourage you to go out there and look. It is typically something that you're going to see. Larger corporations usually have this for director and above, just to give you that idea. And to be clear, I've also been in situations where my mentor is also my sponsor. That's where you talked before, Donnie, about that peer-to-peer mentorship where you're kind of growing together. You'll
Yeah.
eventually get to a point, if you work with a mentor long enough, that even if you started off with your mentor kind of being a step above you, you eventually reach that same plateau, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
toe to toe with them. Your mentor realizes that. They kind of transition into a sponsor. They realize, you've learned well, Daniel-san. The master has become the student has become the master. Now they
Yeah.
start singing your praises maybe a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the distinction. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely.
All right. So we got two more quick things to cover. First off, building an effective mentor relationship. There's a couple different traits that I just really want leaders to think through together. First off, you have to be humble, vulnerable, and intentional. So if you're getting into a mentor mentee relationship and you think that you are that you're coming down from Mount Olympus to teach the lowly, underlings, the mouth breathers, how to rise out of the sea, you are not a mentor. Go back to your cave. Nobody cares about your opinion, right? That's you're in it for the wrong thing. If you can look at yourself and say, "I only got to where I am because somebody gave a shit about where I was." If you can look at that and say, "I want to do that for somebody else," and if you can understand that you don't know it all, you don't have all the answers, but maybe you have some of them, and maybe you can help somebody else to not step into the same potholes you stepped in, that makes a good mentor. I'm going to ask you then to also be, when I talk about intentional, don't go into a mentor relationship, and this is on both sides, mentor, mentee. You don't go into that relationship saying, "Hey, I want help with the thing." I want you to be tactical about it. Take the two or three big things that you're trying to break down, two or three big audacious goals, break those down into smaller chunks, break those down into smaller chunks. Use the rule of 3. All right. So 3 big ones in the next, what are you going to do in the next year, 5 years, whatever you want to go with? And then break that down. What 3 things have to happen for each of these? Right. So break these 3. Now I've got 9. Right. Keep going. Keep breaking that down. Make those SMART goals. Be tactical with it so that when you meet with your mentor, when you meet with your mentee, everybody knows why they came to the party and what the outcome is going to be. And then finally, make sure that you're building some accountability and feedback loops in there. And again, this doesn't matter which side of the coin you're on, whether you're the mentor or the mentee. If you don't have some way to say this relationship is benefiting and mutually benefiting, then you've done it wrong. Does that resonate with you, Donnie? Is that kind of
Yeah.
any other tidbits you would throw in there?
I think that I want to, you said something that has been all, like I've said it for over and over and over and over for years. And that is, you got to have gas. You have to have give a shit. But part of having that give a shit and you got to where you were because somebody gave a shit about you. Well, now you're giving a shit about somebody else. And the thing that mostly has resonated with me, and this is something that I was taught from the day that I walked in building, I thought I would never forget it, but it's the building you walk into at boot camp, you know, and 1405, that's the one. 1405. You get off the bus, they're yelling at you. You line up along this wall. This guy looked at me straight in the face and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Kentucky." He said, "Folks from Kentucky usually make it in this gig, right?" And years later, when I got to my first ship, there was my first unofficial mentor was my chief, still one of my best friends to this day. He said, "All right, here's what we're doing. I don't know how to do your job. You guys went to school for it. I haven't. But at some point in time, I'm going to know how to do that job, and I appreciate it if you would teach me the right way." I say all that to say, over a period of time, we're all training our replacement, right? Because I'm not going to do it forever. You're not going to do it forever. The people who are trying to get to where we are, well, we can't ever leave on a good note if we don't make sure that they're good,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the give a shit, right? Like, be humble enough to know, like, um, somebody else is going to have to carry this one day. You ever heard David Goggins talk about who's going to carry the boats and the
Mm-hmm.
logs? Yeah, it's not going to be David forever. In this case, it's not going to be Luke or Donnie forever. Somebody's going to have to keep carrying this torch. And how will they ever get to that point if you don't give a shit enough to teach them the right way? Otherwise, they'll just fall off. And
Exactly.
and what you have done is you have unintentionally created a gap which becomes a problem for someone else. Do you want that on your conscience? No? Cool. Be a mentor.
Right. Right. And understand too that this, a lot of people look at this and think, well, this is just a career development thing. I'd push it past that.
It's
So
a life
some of
skill, man.
yeah, it is. It is. So with that, I'm going to tease two things, and we'll bring it to a close here in a couple minutes. But I'm going to tease two things to our audience that's coming on the horizon. First off, I have been working with actually several colleagues. In fact, Mr. Disler here has weighed in on it. I've been working on a field manual, if you will, a tactical guide for mentoring. I'm still working on this. Frankly, I'd hoped to have it done by second quarter this year, but I mentioned earlier I'm in the final phases of my capstone project for my master's program. So frankly, this is back burner. So I
Life
will finish it.
happens.
Right, I will finish it. But essentially, that is it's intended to be a digital workbook. The whole goal of that is to, we're telling you mentorship is good. You should do it. Here's some tips. I want to give you the actual tactical, in the weeds, step by step. This is the thought process you should go through, all the way down to what does your first mentoring meeting look like, right? What do you talk about? How do you prepare for it? What about being a mentee, right? How do you prepare for that? So this guide will give you step by step all of those pieces. As soon as I get it launched, I'll have a separate chat. Donnie, maybe you and I can get back together and we
Let's
will
do it.
unveil that thing to the world.
Let's
But
do it.
that will be something that I'll have for sale out on the site. I do intend to publish 2 distinct versions of this. So there will be one that is more geared towards adults. The other one is more geared towards teenagers. And that gets me to my second point. When we talk about this being more than just a career thing, outside of the Psych Leadership podcast, outside of my day job, as if I wasn't freaking busy enough, my wife and I run a small nonprofit organization. It's called Rise Up Academics. We're currently focused on building leadership, mentoring type of opportunities for students in Northern Kentucky. In fact, earlier today, I was doing intern interviews. We're expanding our internship our internship program again. So we had 5 interns last year, 10 this year. We're going to between 12 and 15 next year. I'm both excited and maybe a little nervous to tell you that we actually expanded into a second high school as of today. So we started our intern interviews, realized that we had more need than we had viable candidates. That's not a shot against anybody. These students get offers from all over the place, but frankly, the pool was a little more shallow than we were comfortable with. And we said, well, you know what? We were going to expand to another high school. Now's the time, right? So within that program, within Rise Up Academics, we're looking to launch a program in Northern Kentucky called Phoenix Mentoring. The general concept here, Donnie, it will be, we will have 3, or the intent, I should say. The intent is to have 3 licensed professional counselors. These would be students that are fresh out of college, just got their licensure. They are able to do the job, but they don't have a ton of experience. So they get to be out of college type interns, paid internship positions. We would couple those 3 licensed professional counselors, each of them with 5 paid interns. These are senior high school students. So now we've got 15 interns that are seniors plus 3 that are recent college graduates. Okay. We are targeting specifically the underprivileged. Statistically speaking, when you look at students that are underperforming in school, that do not have solid mentorship, leadership examples in their life, not only does it impact their school studies, right? I mean, that's fairly obvious, but it starts to chip away at their mental health. And it happens in adults too. We don't talk about it for adults. We put on the blinders. We play pretend with that shit. But
That's
the
true.
reality is, if you don't have a solid mentor in your life, not only is it going to impact your performance, whether that's at work or at school, but it eventually chips away at your self-confidence, at your anxiety, which feeds depression, which feeds suicide. I could go on and on and on,
That's a
right?
rabbit hole.
Right. And we are seeing this kind of trend in Northern Kentucky. We are seeing suicide rates go up. And I don't see any, I feel like we're driving by this giant billboard that says, start a mentorship program, create leadership opportunities, give these kids a guidepost to steer towards. And some of these things might start to resolve themselves. Now, there's 2 basic psychological tests that we can use to baseline this, right? We've got one called the GAD-7. So this is a basic psychological test. It's the generalized anxiety disorder test. It gives us a baseline for where the kids are. Okay. We can also use the PHQ-7. This is a patient health questionnaire that's used to rate depression. Okay. So if we were hypothetically, and this is an applied research study to prove out a proof of concept, if you will, for Phoenix Mentoring, we can easily baseline where these students are. And then that also allows you to incrementally introduce the mentoring program where, again, we've got 3 licensed professional counselors, 15 student mentors. That bleeds out to 150 students that are in need. Now, I want to tell you, I ran the numbers. 150 students, we are not even touching 1% of the overall need in Northern Kentucky. If I look at just the lower percentage, the folks that are below the poverty line, the folks with the highest mental health problems and the highest academic deficiencies, you're looking at over, I believe the figures are 32% in Kenton County in Northern Kentucky and 29%. That's just the high school population. I didn't even pull in middle schools. Okay. 32 and 29%. If you run the numbers on the population, again, just looking at high school students, if I tackle 150, I'm not even hitting 1%. That's how big the damn problem is. But I think we can get our arms around it with something like this. Basically, what we would do is this whole concept wraps in the idea of social emotional learning. It pulls in Vygotsky's concepts. It pulls in Ryan and DC's concepts and gives these kids, first off, the educational mentoring and tutoring so that we can check the box. We can handle the academic deficiencies. Then we layer in coping skills and ways to deal with depression. We create belonging. We create autonomy. We create, what was the other one? Autonomy,
Competence,
belonging, competence. Yes, we create that. And then is it possible that we would start seeing some of these things slow down? Is it possible that because we gave a shit, right, because we had a little bit of gas, that maybe we change things around? So that's what I've been trying to build. So we will have the instruction manual out there. That will be, and that's why I'm doing the teenage version of it, by the way. We'll have that tactical guide for mentoring will be out there for the adults. You'll be able to download that. I do not have a price point yet for it, but expect it to be under $20. And it's meant to be a digital workbook. I want this to be accessible. So basically, we have a technology scholarship, and that's part of Rise Up Academics. So I'm just funneling it right in that because I'm going to need funding for the mentoring program. So why not have one hand feed the other, right?
Yeah.
And so that book will be out there, and then the intent is to start pitching this to school systems in Northern Kentucky. I want somebody hearing this to say, damn, that's a good idea, and contact me and help me launch this thing. Because I have a full business plan for it. I have the financials worked out. Essentially, you'd need, I believe the final figure it came out to is $1.5 million to do this that's the kickoff and 1 full year for full paid positions to scale this. And then every year thereafter, it drops off because the technology, the equipment, the steps that we have to take to ensure ethical privacy and those kind of things become residual. I don't have to rebuy those every year. Okay. But that's kind of what we're building towards, Donnie. The mentorship program that I'm talking about, this is why I'm so passionate about it.
I can tell.
It's not just something for the adults. It's every kid, every person in your life needs a mentor, should be a mentor.
True that.
All right. Well, folks, that is all the time we have for today. Donnie, I appreciate you as always jumping in, hanging out with me today. I'll have plenty of links in the description so that you guys can see all the psychology behind this. This isn't just the gospel according to Luke and Donnie. There is some definite, there are some studies that support everything that I've said today. So take a look at those. Don't just believe me. Go out there and do your own research. Thanks again, folks. Have a great day.